Hey scholars, it is great to have you here today. Let's get started. So our overall lesson will be over measures of central tendency. This is a fancy name for mean, median, mode, range, and outliers. Our agenda for today will start with updates, announcements that I have for you. These might change every day, just giving you heads up about what's happening. We'll have the bell work, and then we'll do like a bell work review. Then I will show you how to turn in any missing assignments that you have in your binder that you want to turn in to me while we're away so that I can grade those. Then we will start with our guided notes for measures of central tendency. Then you will end with a skill check and you can start your IP. So here are our first updates. Welcome to the first day of e-learning. We are embarking on an exciting time where we can learn math from home. That is real cool. So every A day, you want to make sure you complete my e-learning work. It will be posted on Haiku, and it'll be the first thing that you see when you go to the Algebra 1 Haiku page. If you ever have questions, and if it's before 9 p.m., just email me at the email that you see, and I will respond to you within 5 minutes. After 9 p.m., it might take me a little longer. And you might see photos throughout the PowerPoint of you all that I have found. And so let's see who gets featured. So let's get started with our lesson. First, I want to start with bell work. So what you need to do is, if you have not already, I need you to pause the video in just a moment, and you're going to go to the Haiku page and complete the bell work. Click the bell work link, fill out the bell work, and then you're going to return. Remember, bell work is 4 points, so it's important that you get started, okay? So go ahead and pause, go to Haiku, and start your bell work. Okay, welcome back. So now that you've completed the bell work, let's go over the bell work questions for today. The first one said to factor x squared plus 5x plus 6. The first thing we need to do is find A, B, and C. A is the coefficient in front of x squared. When there is not one listed, we assume it's 1. B is the coefficient in front of x, which is 5. And C is the constant, which is 6. Once we find A, B, and C, we need to find our magic numbers. Okay, so our magic numbers have to multiply to A times C, which is 1 times 6, which gives us 6. And it needs to add to our B value, which is 5. So our magic numbers need to multiply to 6 and add to 5. Those two numbers would be 3 and 2. Remember, you can pause this video at any time if you want to try on your own before I go through the answers. So now that we found our magic number, we need to replace our middle term 5x with 3x and 2x. So we'll keep x squared, but 5x turns into 3x plus 2x, and then we bring down our constant term of 6. Once we do that, we need to group our first two terms and our second two terms together. It's time for us to decide what we can divide our first two terms by. We can take out an x from both of these terms, and we can also take out a 2 from our second two terms. Remember, you do not have to take out the same value from your first group as you take out from your second group. So once we divide our first two terms by x, we have to factor an x out. So we write x on the outside, and then we say what's left. When we divide x squared divided by x, we get 1x left. Plus, when we divide 3x by x, our x's cancel, and we're left with 3. For the next two terms, we factored out a value of 2, and in parentheses, we're going to write what's left. So when we cross out our 2's, all we're left with is x plus 6 divided by 2, which gives us 3. So now we can write our factors. Remember, our first factor is going to be whatever is the same in both terms. So in our first term, we have an x plus 3. And in our second term, we also have an x plus 3. So for our answer, the first factor will be x plus 3. Once we find our first factor, we can cross out that factor, and our second factor will be whatever values are left. So our second factor would be x plus 2, because those are the two terms that are left. And we have factored x squared plus 5x plus 6. Let's go through and do number 2. So in number 2, the first thing we should do is identify A, B, and C. A this time is 3, B is -9, and C is 6. Now, is there a number that I can divide 3, -9, and 6 by? Absolutely. So the GCF, the greatest common factor between those numbers, would be 3. So when I divide 3x squared, -9x, and 6 by 3, I'm going to get x squared minus 3x plus 2. Remember, I can draw my greatest common factor down to the end, and I can fill in my factors once I get to that point. So now we need to multiply A times C and add it to B. Okay? So in this case, we have new values for A, B, and C. So let's go ahead and update those. Our new values are now 1 for A, -3 for B, and 2 for C. So we need to find our two magic numbers. Two numbers that multiply to A times C, which is 2, and add to B, which is -3. So those numbers would be -1 and -2. -1 times -2 is +2, and -1 plus -2 is -3. So we can substitute -1x and -2x in for our middle term, -3x. Now we need to group them. We'll have x squared minus 1x and -2x plus 2 with a plus sign in between. I can take out an x from my first group, and I have to write what's left. So when I divide x squared divided by x, I get 1x. And when I divide 1x by x, I get a -1. And I can divide my second two terms by -2, so I'm going to take out a -2. And when I do that, I'll get x minus 1. So my factors would be x minus 1 and x minus 2. So here is our answer. For number 3, says, what is the average of the following data set? I have 14, 7, 9, 34, 22, 13, 2, and 6. So to find the average of any value, you add up all of your values and divide by the number of values. So we'll have 14 plus 7 plus 9 plus 34 plus 22 plus 13 plus 2 plus 6, all divided by the number of numbers. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all divided by 8. So now you need to add 14, 7, 9, 34, 22, 13, 2, and 6. And when you do that, you get 107. Divided by 8. And that value would be 13.4. Okay, so that's the end of our bell work review. Let's move forward, and I would like to show you how to submit any missing work that you might have in your binder at home to me so that I can grade it and get those inserted into the gradebook. If you're not sure if you have any missing assignments, then I can surely let you know if you send me an email. So first, if you have any homework that you have completed or that you're going to work on while you're at home that you already have the worksheet for, I would like you to take a picture of the front and the back of the homework and email the pictures to me at jlockhart@riversidehighschool.org. Okay, and then I can grade it and I can insert it into the gradebook for you so that you can get credit on your hard work. So let's get started with our lesson for today called Introduction to Measures of Central Tendency. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to say, I can find the mean, median, mode, range, and outliers of a data set. Let's get started. So data is everywhere. It's in sports, it's in surveys for prom committee, and so many other areas of our lives. It's not always helpful to list every single data value. Sometimes we just need an overview of how the data behaves. The mean, median, mode, and range values provide a great overview of data. First, let's talk about the mean. The mean is the average of the values in a data set. To calculate the mean of a set of data, we find the sum of all of the data values, and then dividing it by the number of data values, we add it up. First example, find the mean of the test scores 82, 75, 91, 84, 63, 75, 29, 98, 75, and 78. So what we need to do is to find the sum of all of the data values first. So 82 plus 75 plus 91 plus 84 plus 63 plus 75 plus 29 plus 98 plus 75 plus 78. All divided by our next step. Our next step says to divide by the number of data values that we added up. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 data values. Perfect. So now we need to add up all of those numbers in the numerator. And those numbers would add up to 750. All divided by 10. And when we do 750 divided by 10, we get 75 as our answer, and that is the mean or the average value of all these numbers listed in our data set. Next, let's see how much you understand. So if you need to go back and look over the example that we just did, please do so. Once you understand the example that we just did, then I want you to give this a try. So find the mean of the data below. So what we would do first is we would add up all of our data values. 4 plus 10 plus 5 plus 8 plus 6 plus 2 plus 22 plus 7. And then we have to go through and count how many values that we have, and that will go in our denominator. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 will go in our denominator. And we can simply add all the top values, and we'll get 64, all divided by 8. And 64 divided by 8 is 8. Next, let's talk about the median. So the median separates the higher half of the data from the lower half of the data. It's kind of like being the middle child in the family. So if you're the middle child, you separate the youngest from the oldest. So to find the median of any data set, you arrange the values in order from least to greatest, from smallest to largest. Then you find the middle value. If there are two middle values, you want to find the average of those two middle values. So if you find two middle values, you will write those down and add them up and then divide them by 2, and that will be your new middle number. Okay, let's do the first example. The first example says find the median of the test scores. So we have been working with these same values, and we want to add them up. We want to put them in order first, and then step 2, we want to find the middle value. Okay, so let's put them in order. We have to find the smallest value. In this case, it would be 29. So 29 comes first. Then we need to look through our data and find our next largest value, and it would be 63. Then we look for the next one, and we have 75. And we have more 75, so we want to write all of those next to one another. Then we have 78. Then we have 82. Then 84. Then 98. Nope, I'm wrong. Next would come 91, then 98. Okay, so we did step 1. We arranged the data values from least to greatest. Now we need to find the middle value. So we're going to cross out the values on the outside until we get to the middle. Okay, when I got to the middle, I had 2 middle values. So what that means is I need to find the average of the 2 values. So I'm going to take 75 plus 78 and divide it by 2. When I do this, I get 153 divided by 2, and that answer is 76.5. So my median of the data, the middle number for this data, is 76.5. Now is a chance for you to try. If you need to go back to the previous problem and pause and work through those steps that I just went through, please do so. Once you feel comfortable, then you can come back to this slide and try the check for understanding on your own. I want you to find the median of the data below. So we're going to put these values in order from least to greatest. We have 2 first. Then another 2, we want to list both of those together. Then we have 4. Then 5. Then 6. Then 7. then 8, then 10, then 22. Then we want to cross out on the outsides until we get into the middle. And this time we only have one value in the middle, so our median would be 6. Now let's talk about mode. So the mode tells us which values are repeated most in a data set. To calculate mode of a data set, look for the value or values that are repeated. If there are 2 values that are repeated the same number of times, the data set is called bimodal. So let's do an example. Find the mode of the test scores. So what I need to do is I need to go through and see how many number of times each number in my data set is listed. So let's start with 82. How many times is 82 listed in our data set? Well, there's only one value of 82, so that'll be 1 time. Now let's see how many times is our next data set listed. So 75, I need to look and see if there are any other 75s here. And I have 1, 2, 3. So I'll write 75 appears 3 times. Now let's see how many times 91 is listed. 91 is listed only 1 time, so we'll put a 1. What about 84? 84 so only shows up once. 63 shows up once. 29 shows up once. 98 shows up once. And 78 shows up once. Okay, so the mode tells us which value is repeated most in a data set. So in this case, the value that is repeated the most would be 75. So 75 is our mode. So here is our check for understanding practice problem. If you need to go back to the previous example to practice before you try this, please do so. When you're ready, come back to this problem and try it on your own. So we'll need to see which value is listed the most. Well, in this case, I need to add a data point 2. So let's start with 4. So 4 appears once, 10 appears once, 5 appears once, 8 appears once, 6 appears once, 2 appears twice, and let's see, 22 appears once, and 7 appears once. So the number that appears the most amount of times would be 2. So 2 is the mode of the data set here on this problem. Now let's talk about the range. The range tells us how much spread is in the data. To calculate the range, you want to take the highest value minus the lowest value. So find the range in the test scores listed here. The first thing we need to do is find our highest value. Our highest value in this case would be 98. So we'll take 98. Then it says to write a minus sign. Now we need to find the lowest value. The lowest value in this data set is 29. So minus 29. And once we find the difference, we will have found our range. So the difference between 98 and 29 is going to be 69. So 69 is the range of the values in this data set. If you need to go back to that previous problem and calculate the range and see how that works, then please go back. When you're ready, come back to this problem and try on your own. So we have to first find the highest value and lowest value in the data. So the highest value is 22 minus the lowest value. The lowest value is 2. So 22 minus 2 gives us 20. So the range of this data set is 20. All right, last topic is outliers. Remember, at any time throughout this video, feel free to pause, stop, go back, rewind, whatever works for you. You do not have to just let the video play and not pause it. You can pause it, take a break, come back, whatever works. Last concept is outliers. So did any of the scores that were given on the math test stand out as being atypical of the majority of the data? Which value was it? So we can actually refer to that data on this screen. The data they're talking about is the data that I'm circling right now. So are any of those values a lot smaller or a lot larger than the rest? The one that is would be this value 29. 29 is a lot smaller than the rest of those values, okay? So this value was not like the rest of the data values, and therefore we call it an outlier. Let's see what happens to the mean, median, mode, and range if we remove the outlier from our data. Okay, so our mean with that value, which we've already found when we did our mean example, was 75. Without the outlier, we would add up all the data values without including 29, and we would get 721. And because we took out this outlier, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 values. So we divide that by 9, and our new mean would be 80. Okay. For our median of this data that we calculated in our earlier example, we got 76.5. Okay. The median without the outlier, so we would have to arrange these values in order from least to greatest and find the one in the middle. And when we do that, we would find that without this number 29, that the new middle number would be 78. Now for the mode. The mode with the outlier is 75. So the number that occurs the most is still 75. So 75 is the mode with and without the outlier. The range with the outlier, 29, in our earlier example that we calculated, we got 69. The new range would be, well, the highest number is still 98, but the lowest number is no longer 29 because we took that out. The lowest number is now 63. So 98 minus 63 would give us a new range of 35. So let's go back to our question that we started with. I'm going to erase some of these marks so that we can see the data values that we are starting with. So it says, let's see what happens to the mean, median, mode, and range if we were to move the outlier from the data. So let's take a look at each thing. So the mean. The mean changed pretty significantly when we took out our outlier of 29. The mean of 80 is now more representative of the test scores. That grade of 29 was really pulling down that average, and that's why we got the average was 75. Now the median didn't change much. Okay, that middle value didn't change much. The mode didn't change much. Actually, it didn't change at all. It's exactly the same. The range was another element that was greatly affected by our outlier. It went from 69 to 35. Okay, so what outliers do is they greatly affect our mean and range. The median and mode are pretty much untouched. Okay, so when we are looking at a set of data, it doesn't matter what data it is, we have to be cognitive of what information is being shared about that data. If the mean is being shared and if the range is being shared, we have to make sure that we start thinking about outliers. But if the median and the mode are shared, we can say that those are two pretty good representations of data because they are not really affected as much by outliers. Okay? Let's see if we can do this together. If you need to go back and decide how to find an outlier, please do, and come back when you're ready. So remember, the outlier is the number that varies differently from the rest. Okay, one that is much bigger or much smaller than the other values. So in this case, 22 is the outlier because it is much, much, much greater than the other values 4, 10, 5, 8, 6, 2, and 7. All right, you have completed the guided notes for today. The purpose of the guided notes was to give you practice so that you could complete your skill check and your IP effectively. You may go back and rewind this video as many times as you need to get as much practice as you would like before you complete your skill check and IP. Once you're done with the guided notes and you feel comfortable about that, please go to the skill check, and once you're done with the skill check, complete your IP. It was so great to be with you all today, and I will see you again on Wednesday.